Hi, I'm CJ and this is my RC channel. So I'm just mixed up some 30-minute epoxy, and nice thing about the 30 using the slower stuff is you got time to do stuff. I am trimming per instructions. A 1.5 inch piece of fiberglass cloth that is going to go down onto the base of the wing here. I've already got a little bit of glue on the surface. I really should have had my gloves on for that part. You don't want to expose your skin to epoxy any more than is necessary. So it's good to get yourself a nice big box of nitrile gloves. And then what I'm going to do is just take this epoxy and smooth it on into the cloth. Again, the nice thing about the longer curing epoxy is that you don't have to be in a hurry. Okay, I used as little as possible, and I'm not worried about the edge here that's hanging over in this little bit of thread. That can all be trimmed off after this is cured. The real trick here is getting this centered and spread out left to right so it covers as much surface as possible. There we go. That looks good. So I can let this cure and then I'll trim it up. So as you can see, there's a bit of epoxy waste, but you know, that's why I buy it in large jugs. It's better to have too much mixed when you're starting into something than not have enough. Like if I had made a mistake with this cloth, I could just peel it up, snip another piece, and get right back to work with the excess glue. And again, you see how much I got on my fingers. You don't want this kind of epoxy contact with your skin. So just peel them off, and in the trash they go. Nice and easy, cheap. Get them on Amazon. Nitrile gloves. If you are not allergic to silicone, you can get silicone gloves, but you don't necessarily know until you are. So nitrile is pretty much, you know, it's latex free. It doesn't have silicone, so you don't really have to worry about allergies with the nitrile. I used the drill guide to drill the 2 holes at the rear for wing mounting, and I drilled from the bottom as instructed. Now, they don't say to put fiberglass on the top section. I am worried about this being very soft and it collapsing under the screws, even with washers. Plus, I'm worrying about this separating, so I took a piece of 1/64 inch plywood and just made this little tab, 1.5 inches, rounded it and sanded it down to a fine edge, and edged the sides here, and I'm going to glue this in place right here so it is a doubler and it will join up with these 2 pieces of plywood here. Enhances the overall structural strength and provides a solid surface for the washers to press down on. And once this is glued in place, I will use these holes as a guide to drill through this piece of material. So that's my next step. Like I said, this is not in the instructions. This is something I just decided to do myself. And in case you were wondering, it adds 0.47 grams of weight. Once you have the rears drilled, take the gauge, put it against the front, and drill 2 holes. Make sure to line it up against this seam right here. One thing you do want to do, I recommend taping it in place like they suggested. I just used some Scotch Magic tape, worked fine. When you drill these holes, make sure that you point the drill straight down, even though this gauge's surface is going to be slightly angled. You want these holes to be perpendicular to the surface of the table that you have the wing sitting on. Otherwise, when you go to put in the brass fittings, they're going to go, they won't be, the screws aren't going to mate up with them properly. They'll cross thread and you'll have problems. So now that I've got this done, I'm going to put the fuselage under the wing, bolt it on at the tail section loosely, like the instructions say. You want to snug it down, and then I would snug it down so that you can't move it, and then back off each screw about a turn and a half so that you can get a little bit of movement going. Then you're going to measure from the tail boom. Now, I use a slightly different method than what they do with the ruler. What I do is I take a piece of Kevlar line, which has no stretch. Sorry about that. Kevlar line doesn't stretch. It has no flexibility to it. And what I'll do is I tape a, however long it needs to be, I'll, eye it out and give it a couple extra inches and basically make like a measure with it, tape it around the boom, so it's coming straight off the top center of the boom, like that, and then bring that line out to equidistant points on the wingtip either side. I'll usually mark the Kevlar line with like a Sharpie or something to get, to have a little gauge mark. I'll put it at one corner. I might use like the corner here or the corner down here on the plywood. I wouldn't use the trailing edge, because the trailing edge might have a little bit of material missing, like this one does. It may not be perfectly lined up with the edge. You want to use something that is going to, accurately represent the center line of the wing. So, using the carbon fiber spar caps might be the way to go. Or, again, the outer corners of the plywood, like here. And then once you have gotten it in position, hold it, tighten down the 2 rear screws, maybe tape up the front, and I would put like a mark on the F2 firewall right where the center line is, just so you can see that this hasn't moved at all during your process. And then using these holes as guides, drill down through the fiberglass plate at F2, and then you enlarge those holes per the directions, and do the brass fittings, glue them in as we did earlier in the tail section here. Now, I found that when I started to test run these screws, I had a little binding in one of these, maybe a little bit of glue got in there, and what I did was take a very small amount of oil. Don't drip oil down the hole, just put a little bit of oil on the threads. Get any excess off. You don't want a whole bunch of oil, because you don't want it leaking around the sides. You don't want it seeping into the wood. It'll get in between it'll get into the glue area and mess up your the fittings. So just screw it in, screw it out, screw it in, screw it out. Just back it in and out a couple of times, working that oil through there, and it'll clear out any stuck-in material. Now they work nice and smooth. I did it to both sides, even though this side was pretty loose. I wanted to make sure it was a nice, smooth process. I don't want it binding. I don't want to be torquing these fittings out at some point, trying to take the wing off and end up unscrewing the brass fitting from the fuselage. Things like that could go wrong, or just not being able to get the screw out at all without stripping the head, and then you got to take the airplane home half put together and cut the screw off, with a cutting wheel or something like that, and it'll make for a lot of work and a big mess, and you'll have to retrue the wing to the fuselage. So, make sure that these bolts go in and out nice and smooth, and every once in a while when you're doing these, I'd put a little bit of oil on the threads. Again, like if you haven't assembled the plane in a while, I'd put a little oil on the threads, run them in and out, front and back. Make sure that there's nothing that is accumulated or gotten in there that's going to prevent them from going in nice and easy when you're out at the field putting your airplane together. Just food for thought. Okay, I've pinned down the nose of the fuselage with battery and some steel blocks, and as you can see, I've got this piece of Kevlar line taped right to the center. So I put a small black mark on the line. Just be able to see that right there. Okay, and checked it at both sides, and just to make sure, I also used a meter stick, and looks like it is squared up right on the center line, so everything was built square. It's nice. So now I'm gonna tighten down these two bolts while holding the wing in place, and then I'm gonna take my drill and drill the two holes immediately while I'm holding the wing to make sure that it doesn't shift. So I'm going to do that off camera because I can't hold the camera in one hand and drill with the other and hold the wing. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please click like and please subscribe to my channel. If you click the bell icon, you'll receive notifications every time I launch a new video. Thank you for watching.